She tied the knot with a human for peace, then watched him take down armies alone. Entire fleets had been destroyed and countless worlds had burned in the conflict. Yet neither side could claim complete victory. War had become a cycle, endless, cruel, and exhausting. In the midst of this chaos, the Zelari queen, Amara, found herself facing a dilemma. She had inherited the crown when her mother had passed away, and the weight of leadership was heavier than any weapon in her palace. The Dravari were preparing for another massive offensive, and the Zelari armies, though strong, were scattered and disorganized. If she did not act quickly, her civilization could be completely overrun. It was then that the human starship appeared. Humans were a young species, relatively unknown in galactic politics. They had no massive fleets, no centuries of combat experience, and yet somehow they had captured the attention of multiple star systems. The ship carried one human, Captain Elias Varn. He was neither tall nor muscular in the way most alien warriors were, but he carried himself with a confidence that seemed to radiate through the walls of the space station he entered. His eyes were calm, sharp, and always observant, as though he saw more than anyone else in the room. Queen Amara studied him from her observation deck as he disembarked. Her advisors had insisted that the humans could not influence the course of the galaxy, that Elias was merely a diplomat, and that he carried no power to prevent the coming war. Yet, something about his presence made her pause. Humans were unpredictable. They did not follow the strict codes of alien hierarchy, and that unpredictability was often their greatest strength. "I have come to offer assistance," Elias said when he met the queen in her ceremonial hall. His voice was steady, polite, but firm. "I understand your civilizations are at war. I can help you find a path to peace." The queen raised an eyebrow. "And what can a human offer that centuries of alien strategy cannot?" she asked, her tone polite but skeptical. Elias smiled faintly. "Perspective," he said simply. "Sometimes the solution does not come from more firepower or stronger armies. Sometimes it comes from thinking differently." The queen's advisors murmured among themselves. The Zelari had never relied on humans before, and their skepticism was understandable. Elias, however, remained calm. His confidence was not arrogance, it was quiet certainty. Amara leaned back in her throne. "Very well, Captain. Show me this perspective of yours, but know this, my people have died for centuries. We will not accept failure." Elias nodded. "I do not intend to fail," he replied. The situation escalated quickly. The Dravari had already mobilized a fleet large enough to crush several star systems at once. Their generals were ruthless and experienced, and their soldiers were disciplined to a fault. The Zelari armies, though brave, had grown complacent over time, relying on traditions that no longer served them in the face of a modern, mobile enemy. Amara knew that she needed more than a plan, she needed a symbol. A way to show both her people and the Dravari that the Zelari were united, capable, and willing to take bold steps for peace. After long discussions with her council, she proposed a solution that shocked everyone: a marriage alliance. It was not love, not friendship, but a strategic move. If the Zelari queen married the human, it would symbolize unity and strength. It would send a message to the galaxy. The Zelari were not alone, and the humans, though young, were allies to be reckoned with. Elias did not hesitate. He understood the gravity of the situation. Marriage, in this context, was not about romance. It was about responsibility, courage, and a commitment to the greater good. He agreed, knowing that the ceremony would mark a turning point in galactic history. The preparations were unlike anything the human had ever seen. The space station was adorned with lights that shimmered like stars, corridors were lined with banners, and ceremonial drones hovered silently above the crowd. Delegates from dozens of civilizations gathered to witness the event, their eyes wide with curiosity and skepticism. As the day of the ceremony arrived, Elias and Amara stood before the assembly. The queen's armor was ceremonial, gleaming under the station's artificial sun, while Elias wore a simple uniform, unadorned yet dignified. When they exchanged vows, the crowd held its breath. It was a union of convenience, a pact forged in desperation, yet there was an undeniable tension in the air. Many expected tension, conflict, or even ridicule. But the human stood calmly, his posture straight, his voice steady. Amara, though reserved, noticed the way he observed the room, taking in every detail without judgment or fear. He was unlike any being she had encountered. After the ceremony, the real work began. Amara watched Elias closely as he moved among her generals and advisors. He asked questions they had never considered. He studied the maps of battlefields and star systems with a careful eye, noting weaknesses and strengths. His approach was methodical yet creative. The queen's advisors were quick to doubt. "He is just a human," one muttered. "He has no experience with our armies, our fleets, or our technology." Amara, however, remained silent. She had seen enough to know that humans thought differently. Where alien commanders relied on power and numbers, Elias relied on strategy, anticipation, and ingenuity. The first small test came quickly. A Dravari scouting fleet entered Zelari space, attempting to disrupt supply lines. Most expected the Zelari to respond with a full strike, risking unnecessary casualties. Elias, however, suggested a different approach. "Do not attack directly," he said. "We will set traps, use their own overconfidence against them. We can neutralize the threat with minimal losses." The queen was skeptical but allowed it. She watched as Elias coordinated a small team of human and Zelari soldiers. They used the asteroids as cover, created false signals, and manipulated enemy sensors. Within hours, the Dravari fleet had been trapped, forced to retreat, and humiliated. Amara's eyes widened. She had expected the human to be clever, but not this effective. One being, using intellect and observation, had turned what should have been a dangerous confrontation into a decisive victory. The news spread quickly. Across Zelari space, whispers ran through the streets and council halls. The human was not just a diplomat. He was a force to be reckoned with, a mind capable of outthinking entire armies. For Amara, it was both exhilarating and unsettling. She had married this human for peace, expecting a figurehead, someone who could serve as a symbol of unity. Instead, she had found someone capable of reshaping the course of war itself. As night fell over the space station, Amara stood alone on her observation deck, looking out at the stars. Elias had gone to study reports of enemy movements, his presence calm, almost ordinary. Yet the energy he brought to the Zelari people was extraordinary. "I may not understand humans yet," she whispered to herself, "but perhaps I am about to learn something the galaxy has not seen before." In that moment, a quiet determination settled over her. The queen realized that the war might not be won by fleets or weapons, but by courage, strategy, and the unpredictability of one human mind. And so, as the galaxy held its breath, the stage was set. Alliances would be tested, battles would rage, and a human diplomat, now tied to the Zelari queen, would begin a journey that could change the fate of countless worlds. Amara knew one thing for certain. She had married not just a human, but a force of nature, one whose actions could ripple across the stars. And while peace was the goal, the coming days would reveal just how capable this human truly was when faced with the chaos of war. After the marriage ceremony, life in the Zelari palace settled into an uneasy rhythm. The wedding had been a grand spectacle, watched by countless species, but beneath the glittering halls and celebratory feasts, tension simmered. The Dravari were gathering their forces in secret, and the threat of war loomed closer with each passing day. Queen Amara had expected a human to be a diplomat, a figurehead whose role was mostly symbolic. She had not expected him to observe every detail, every weak point, every tactical possibility. Captain Elias Varn moved through the palace and the war rooms with quiet confidence, analyzing fleets, reviewing supply chains, and questioning traditional strategies. Amara watched him carefully, noting how he approached each problem. While her generals relied on brute strength and centuries of established doctrine, Elias thought differently. He looked for patterns, studied probabilities, and devised strategies that seemed impossible to others. One evening, she entered the war room unexpectedly. A group of her senior generals was gathered around a holographic map, discussing the placement of ships and the timing of attacks. Elias was already there, scribbling notes in a small notebook. "If the Dravari expect us to defend the outer rim first, we should leave it lightly guarded," he said. "They will assume we will protect it heavily. Instead, we can set traps there and strike them when they overextend." The generals stared at him in disbelief. "And you believe this will work?" one of them asked. Elias smiled faintly. "I believe they will make predictable mistakes if they think we are predictable. That is the advantage of the unexpected." Amara felt a small thrill of hope. Here was a human who did not follow convention, who could anticipate the enemy's moves before they happened. He was already changing the way her army thought. Days passed, and small incidents began to test Elias' ideas. Rebel factions loyal to the Dravari struck minor outposts along the border. Most commanders reacted with overwhelming force, fearing even a small loss would inspire panic. Elias, however, instructed them to remain calm and use tactics rather than numbers. He organized small squads to strike key points quietly, sabotaging supply lines and intercepting communications. The human soldiers he worked with were few, but they moved with precision and discipline, taking advantage of terrain, cover, and the enemy's assumptions. Queen Amara observed from her chambers. Each successful operation increased her admiration and her unease. She had married Elias to create peace, not to watch him wage war. Yet every time she saw him, she realized that human ingenuity might be the only thing that could stop the Dravari. Amara's advisors were divided. Some believed Elias was brilliant, perhaps even the savior of their civilization. Others thought relying on a human for war strategy was dangerous and reckless. "He is clever, yes," one general admitted quietly, "but one man cannot control the tide of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of ships." Amara said nothing. She had seen what humans were capable of, and she had learned not to underestimate them. Elias' calm presence and analytical mind were already reshaping her armies, even before the first large-scale battle had begun. Then came intelligence that the Dravari were preparing a major strike. Their forces were larger than anyone had anticipated, and their generals were ruthless. Reports suggested that they intended to hit multiple planets at once, overwhelming the Zelari defenses. The queen summoned Elias to her private chambers. "This is it," she said. "They are coming for us, and soon. I want your plan, human. Show me what we can do." Elias studied the holographic map carefully. "We do not need to match them in numbers," he said. "We need to be faster, smarter, and more unpredictable. I will not try to fight them the way they expect. That is a path to defeat. We will use their confidence against them, turn their strength into weakness." Amara frowned. "And if it fails?" Elias looked at her steadily. "Then we learn and adjust, but I do not expect it to fail, not if we act precisely and decisively." Over the next few days, Elias prepared the Zelari forces. He instructed the soldiers in new tactics, showing them how to move silently, how to use the environment to their advantage, and how to anticipate the enemy's reactions. Alien commanders, at first skeptical, began to see results as small skirmishes repeatedly ended in their favor. Amara watched him training the troops. Unlike other species, humans relied on intuition, observation, and rapid adaptation. Elias would move among them, correcting mistakes, offering suggestions, and pushing them to think differently. He was not commanding with authority alone, he was teaching them how to think like him. The palace buzzed with anticipation. News of the Dravari's advance spread, and citizens prepared for possible attacks. Traders secured supplies, engineers repaired ships, and medics prepared for casualties. But amidst the preparation, a sense of hope grew, hope that the human might bring victory where others feared defeat. One night, Amara walked through the training grounds. Soldiers were practicing maneuvers under Elia's watchful eye. He moved among them quietly, demonstrating techniques with calm precision. One small squad of Zelari soldiers executed a flanking maneuver perfectly, catching the instructors off guard. "Not bad," Elia said, smiling faintly, "but you must always anticipate the unexpected. Your enemy will not fight by the rules, so neither can you." Amara stood back, her arms crossed. She felt a mix of admiration and worry. This human was teaching her people to think differently, to challenge their instincts, and to trust in intellect over force. Yet she wondered how far one human could go against an enemy as vast and relentless as the Dravari. The following day, intelligence reports confirmed that the Dravari were moving quickly. Their armada was massive, stretching across several star systems. Amara called a council of her advisors. "We face the largest threat in our history," she said. "Elias, what do you suggest?" Elias examined the fleet data, then pointed to key positions on the map. "We will not meet them head-on," he said. "We will divide their attention, strike weak points, and force them to make mistakes. Timing and coordination will be everything. One wrong move on their part, and the entire fleet could collapse." The generals exchanged uneasy glances. "And you think a single human can coordinate this?" one asked. Elias looked at them calmly. "I am not alone. I will work with your commanders, but we will act with precision. Our strength is not in numbers, but in strategy. If we follow the plan exactly, we can win." Amara nodded slowly. She could see the determination in his eyes, the quiet certainty that had already won small victories. She decided to trust him. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope that the war could be ended, not with destruction, but with cleverness and foresight. As night fell again over the palace, Amara observed the stars. In the darkness, she could see the lights of distant fleets, moving like fireflies across the galaxy. The Dravari were coming, but now the Zelari had an unexpected advantage, a human mind capable of seeing the battle before it even began. The calm before the storm was tense but filled with quiet anticipation. Soldiers prepared, fleets moved into position, and civilians prayed for peace. And at the center of it all, Elias continued his work, studying every variable, anticipating every move, and preparing to face an enemy that thought victory was guaranteed. Amara realized that the coming days would reveal the true measure of humans. Could one being, a human, really outthink entire armies? Could intellect and strategy outweigh numbers and experience? As she retired to her chambers, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Elias had already changed the way she saw humans. She had married for peace, but what she had gained might be far more powerful, a mind capable of facing the galaxy itself. And so, the stage was set. The Zelari waited, the Dravari approached, and one human stood ready to challenge expectations. The calm before the storm had ended, and the first test of strategy, courage, and intellect was about to begin. Amara knew that the galaxy would never be the same after this. One human could change everything. The morning of the first real battle dawned quietly, almost peacefully. From her observation deck, Queen Amara watched the stars twinkle as fleets of Zelari ships moved into formation. The Dravari armada, larger and more imposing, loomed on the outskirts of the contested sector. The sheer size of the enemy forces made many Zelari soldiers anxious. Amara's mind was focused on Elias. She had seen his strategies in theory, his small victories against minor attacks, but now the human would face a full-scale engagement. She could feel the tension in her chest, a mixture of hope and fear. One human against thousands of alien ships, against experienced commanders, against a fleet built for war. Could he really succeed? Elias stood at the center of the command room, calm and collected. His hands moved over a holographic display of the battlefield, rearranging ships and squads with precision. He spoke softly to the Zelari commanders, explaining his plan. "We will not attack directly," he said. "We will let them think they control the field. They expect us to defend predictably. Instead, we will use asteroids as cover and strike where they least expect it." A general frowned. "They have thousands of ships. We cannot hide from them." Elias' eyes met the general's. "Then we do not hide from them. We use their assumptions against them. A small, well-coordinated strike can disable key ships. Once their command ships are affected, their fleets will hesitate, and hesitation is all we need." Amara watched silently. She had trained in warcraft herself, and she understood the brilliance of Elias' thinking. It was daring, almost reckless, but it had a logic that could work. The Zelari ships moved into the asteroid belt, careful not to reveal their full strength. Dravari scouts quickly spotted them and reported their positions. The Dravari generals, confident in their numbers, prepared to engage immediately. Elias had anticipated this. "Wait," he told the Zelari commanders. "Let them come closer. Their confidence will be their weakness. They will overextend and then we strike." Hours passed. The Dravari fleet advanced, expecting an easy victory. They fired long-range weapons, testing the Zelari defenses, but Elias had prepared carefully. He had instructed smaller ships to remain hidden, while his heavier ships used the asteroids as shields. When the Dravari entered the heart of the asteroid field, the trap was sprung. Zelari strike squads darted out from hidden positions, disabling the engines of several Dravari ships. Explosions lit up the blackness of space as weapons fire disrupted their formations. From her observation deck, Queen Amara felt her heart race. She had seen battles before, but this was different. One human had orchestrated a maneuver that turned the odds in their favor, not through brute force, but through clever planning. The Dravari were caught off guard. Their largest command ships were damaged, forcing confusion among their fleets. They tried to regroup, but Elias anticipated every move. He directed Zelari ships to flank from unexpected angles, using the debris of destroyed ships as cover. "Focus on their supply vessels," Elias instructed. "Without resources, they cannot sustain the fight." Zelari pilots followed his orders with precision. Explosions rocked the battlefield as supply ships were disabled, cutting off the Dravari's ability to refuel and repair. The enemy soldiers began to panic, their discipline breaking under the unexpected pressure. Amara could hardly believe her eyes. One human, with a handful of strategies and careful planning, was controlling an entire battle. The Dravari, confident and ruthless, were being dismantled piece by piece. Yet Elias was not reckless. He constantly monitored the battlefield, adapting to the enemy's reactions. When the Dravari tried to regroup, he redirected forces to intercept them. When they attempted a flanking maneuver, he countered it with precision. Every move was anticipated, every mistake of the enemy exploited. The Zelari soldiers, inspired by his calm and determination, fought with renewed courage. They had always been brave, but seeing Elias in action gave them a sense of confidence they had never known. They moved as one, executing maneuvers that had seemed impossible before. Amara's breath caught as a massive Dravari warship entered the field. Its weapons were capable of destroying multiple Zelari ships at once. Many would have panicked, but Elias remained steady. "Use the debris field," he ordered. "Split their attention. Target the engines first." Zelari ships darted in and out of the asteroid field, evading the warship's fire while striking with precision. Within minutes, the massive ship was immobilized. unable to maneuver or fire effectively. The Dravari fleet hesitated, unsure of how to respond. From her vantage point, Amara realized the full extent of what was happening. This human had done what no alien commander could. He had turned a disadvantage into a decisive victory. The Dravari, who had relied on numbers and experience, were being outthought and outmaneuvered. Elias did not celebrate. He continued to monitor the battlefield, adjusting orders, ensuring that every Zelari ship worked in harmony. Small victories accumulated into a larger triumph. Enemy ships were trapped, damaged, or forced to retreat. By the end of the day, the Dravari had lost more than half of their attacking fleet. Their remaining forces withdrew, humiliated and disorganized. The Zelari had won a battle that many had believed impossible. Queen Amara stood in silence, watching the stars where the battle had raged. She felt a mixture of awe, relief, and something deeper, respect for the human she had married. She had tied the knot for peace, expecting a symbol. Instead, she had found a strategist, a commander, and a mind capable of turning the tide of war. When Elias returned to the palace, he was quiet but not proud. He reported to Amara calmly, explaining the outcome and the few areas where improvements could be made. He did not boast, he simply analyzed and prepared for what might come next. Amara approached him as the commanders filed out. "I did not know humans could think like this," she admitted, her voice low. Elias shrugged lightly. "We survive by adapting," he said. "I do not fight to show strength. I fight to win and to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The queen nodded slowly. She realized that this was not just cleverness, it was courage combined with intelligence. The human did not rely on brute force or fear. He relied on knowledge, observation, and quick thinking. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Reports indicated that the Dravari would regroup, learn from their mistakes, and return with even greater force. Amara knew that the coming challenges would be even harder. Yet, for the first time in decades, she felt hope. Elias had proven that one human could face entire armies, not with raw power but with strategy and intellect. And she knew that the galaxy would take notice. Word of this victory would spread, altering the perception of humans among countless species. That night, as Amara watched the stars once more, she thought about the future. She had tied the knot with a human for peace, thinking it would be symbolic. Instead, she had found a force capable of shaping the galaxy itself. The calm before the storm had passed. Battles had begun, and one human was already proving that courage, intellect, and determination could stand against overwhelming odds. Amara realized that the real test was yet to come, and when it did, the human would be at the center of it all. For now, she allowed herself a small smile. The Zelari had won the first battle, and she had a new understanding of what humans could achieve. One human had faced an entire army and prevailed, and she knew, without doubt, that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had never seen anything like him, and Queen Amara would be there to witness every extraordinary moment. The news arrived like a storm. The Dravari were assembling the largest army the galaxy had ever seen. Reports indicated that millions of soldiers, thousands of warships, and countless drones were moving toward the Zelari capital. Entire fleets from surrounding systems had joined, and the Dravari generals were determined to crush the Zelari once and for all. Queen Amara convened her council immediately. The war room buzzed with tension as holographic maps displayed enemy positions. Commanders argued, debated, and proposed countless plans, but every solution seemed impossible. The Dravari's numbers and firepower were overwhelming. Even the most confident generals feared annihilation. Amara's eyes, however, found the calm figure at the center of the room, Elias Varn. He studied the data carefully, his expression neutral, almost serene. There was no panic, no doubt, just observation, analysis, and preparation. "You will not try to meet them head-on," Elias said after a long pause. His voice was quiet but firm. "We cannot win by brute force, but we can win by strategy, by exploiting their weaknesses and by striking where they do not expect it." One general scoffed. "And what weakness does an army this large have? They have numbers, experience, and advanced technology." Elia's eyes met his. "Every army has weaknesses. No matter how large, no matter how experienced, they rely on assumptions. They have patterns. They have leaders they follow. Disrupt those, and their strength becomes a liability." Amara felt a mixture of awe and relief. She had married him for peace, expecting a symbolic figure. Instead, she had found a strategist capable of seeing solutions where others saw only danger. Over the next days, Elias worked tirelessly. He studied enemy communication lines, fleet patterns, and logistical supply chains. He divided the Zelari forces into small, highly mobile units that could move quickly and strike precisely. Human soldiers, though few in number, trained alongside Zelari squads, teaching them tactics that relied on intelligence, speed, and adaptability rather than brute force. The palace was tense. Citizens prepared for possible attacks, medics readied field hospitals, and engineers reinforced the city's defenses. Amara walked through the corridors, observing soldiers as they practiced maneuvers. She could see the determination in their eyes, a determination inspired by one human who refused to yield, even in the face of an army millions strong. Then, the Dravari arrived. Their fleet filled the sky above the capital, a moving wall of warships that blotted out the stars. Drones swarmed around the city, scanning for weaknesses. Soldiers marched in formation, their discipline absolute. It was an army meant to intimidate, to overwhelm. Yet Elias remained calm. "This is exactly what we expected," he told the council. "They think they can scare us. They assume we will panic, but we will not. We will move strategically, and we will strike precisely." The first engagement began on the outskirts of the capital. Dravari forces attacked supply depots and communication hubs, intending to cripple the Zelari before they could respond. Traditional commanders wanted to counterattack immediately, but Elias stopped them. "Patience," he said. "We do not respond how they expect. We let them overextend, then trap them." Amara watched as the plan unfolded. Small Zelari squads, guided by human intelligence and tactics, intercepted supply lines, ambushed enemy squads, and turned Dravari forces against one another. Each move was calculated, each strike precise. What could have been a devastating loss became a series of controlled victories. The Dravari generals grew frustrated. Their soldiers were confused by the Zelari's unexpected strategies. Fleets that should have advanced in perfect coordination became disorganized. Orders from high command were delayed, misinterpreted, or ignored. Every advantage they had counted for nothing against the clever tactics of Elias and his allies. Amara could hardly contain her admiration. She had watched humans in minor skirmishes before, but now she saw the full extent of their capability. One mind, thinking faster and differently than the enemy, was able to outmaneuver forces that dwarfed her entire civilization. As night fell, the Dravari launched a massive assault directly against the capital walls. Thousands of soldiers, heavily armed, stormed forward, expecting to meet resistance. Instead, they were funneled into ambushes, caught in traps, and met by coordinated squads that struck from hidden positions. Explosions shook the city, but casualties among the Zelari were far lower than expected. Elias moved among the battlefield via secure communication links, adjusting strategies in real time. He instructed pilots to use debris and cover, redirected squads to block enemy reinforcements, and even used decoy signals to confuse the Dravari. The capital, which should have been on the brink of destruction, held firm. Amara watched from the observation deck, her heart racing. The humans' methods were unlike anything she had seen. They did not rely on fear or brute strength. They relied on observation, analysis, and precise action. One human mind was controlling the course of the battle, shaping the outcome without ever stepping into danger himself. At one point, a massive Dravari warship breached the outer defenses. It fired indiscriminately, causing panic among nearby soldiers. Elias immediately calculated the trajectory and directed a squadron to target the ship's engines and weapons simultaneously. Within minutes, the ship was immobilized, floating uselessly among the debris. Dravari morale dropped further. The siege continued for days. The Dravari were relentless, sending wave after wave of soldiers, drones, and ships. Each attack was met with careful, intelligent resistance. Elias anticipated their moves, countered their strategies, and ensured that the capital's defenses remained strong. Amara began to understand something profound. This human did not simply fight battles, he reshaped them. He turned desperation into opportunity, chaos into control, and fear into courage. Her people, inspired by his calm and ingenuity, fought with a spirit they had never known. By the fifth day of the siege, the Dravari forces were exhausted, disorganized, and demoralized. Supplies were running low, communications were failing, and soldiers questioned the competence of their generals. What had started as an unstoppable invasion had become a slow, failing siege. Elias called for a final, decisive maneuver. Using the remaining Zelari forces and a small team of human soldiers, he executed a coordinated strike on the enemy command ships. The attack was swift and precise. Key vessels were disabled, communications severed, and the Dravari fleet fell into chaos. From her observation deck, Queen Amara watched as the last Dravari ships withdrew. The siege had failed. The capital stood intact, the city unharmed, and the Zelari forces triumphant. For the first time, Amara felt a deep, personal awe for the human she had married. She had tied the knot for peace, expecting a figurehead. Instead, she had found a strategist, a leader, and a force capable of facing overwhelming armies and emerging victorious. Elias returned to the palace quietly, reporting the results with calm efficiency. There was no boast, no celebration, only a clear analysis of what had worked and what could be improved. Amara approached him as the council filtered out. "I did not know humans could be like this," she admitted. "One mind, one human, has changed the course of an entire battle, an entire siege." Elias nodded. "We do not win by force alone. We win by thinking, by anticipating, by working together. A single human can make a difference, yes, but it is the courage and adaptability of your people that make it possible." Amara smiled faintly. She realized that this was more than strategy. This was hope. The siege of the capital had been the greatest challenge yet, and the human had faced it with intelligence, courage, and calm precision. The Dravari would regroup, she knew. They would return with even greater numbers, even more determination. But now the Zelari had learned a valuable lesson. One human mind, combined with bravery and strategy, could stand against armies that seemed unstoppable. That night, as Amara gazed at the stars, she reflected on what she had witnessed. She had married for peace, but she had gained far more. A partner in thought, a strategist, and a mind capable of guiding her civilization through the darkest of times. The siege was over, but the war was far from finished. Yet for the first time, Amara felt certain that victory was possible. One human had shown her the power of courage, intelligence, and relentless will, and the galaxy would never forget it. The galaxy held its breath. After the siege of the Zelari capital, the Dravari had retreated, humiliated but not yet defeated. Their generals were furious, planning new strategies, while the Zelari celebrated the hard-won victories that had preserved their homeworld. But Queen Amara knew that the greatest challenge was still ahead. The war might be far from over, and the true test of strength was not just in defense. It would come in offense, in the ability to protect the galaxy before another catastrophe arose. Captain Elias Varn walked quietly through the corridors of the palace, reviewing reports and communicating with commanders. His calm demeanor remained unchanged, though he was fully aware of the magnitude of what was at stake. Even with victories behind them, the Dravari were not defeated. They would strike again, stronger, smarter, more determined. Amara approached him in the war room, her eyes reflecting the light of countless holographic maps. "They will come back," she said. "And they will be worse than before. Are you ready for what may come?" Elias met her gaze steadily. "We are ready," he said. "We do not wait for them to dictate the terms. We shape the battlefield before they arrive. Victory is not about fighting harder, it is about fighting smarter." The queen nodded. She had seen his strategies at work, from the small skirmishes to the massive siege. She understood now that human ingenuity was not just cleverness. It was the ability to anticipate, to adapt, and to inspire others to achieve what seemed impossible. Over the next week, Elias reorganized the Zelari forces. Small squads were trained for stealth and precision strikes, fleets were positioned strategically, and supply lines were reinforced. He communicated constantly with soldiers and commanders, refining tactics, adjusting positions, and ensuring that no weakness would be exploited. But Elias did more than plan for war. He also focused on alliances. He reached out to neighboring species, including those who had remained neutral or wary of humans. His diplomacy was quiet but effective. By showing logic, courage, and the results of his strategies, he gained allies who had once doubted him. The galaxy began to see humans in a new light, not as weak or inexperienced, but as a species capable of shaping the fate of entire civilizations. Then the news came. The Dravari were moving again, this time with even greater force. Their fleet was larger, their soldiers more disciplined, and their drones more advanced. This was the final confrontation, the moment when the Zelari and their allies would prove that they could withstand the greatest threat the galaxy had seen in decades. Elias called a council with the queen and her generals. "This will be the most challenging battle yet," he said. "But we do not fight for glory. We fight to protect our people, to preserve peace, and to show that courage and intelligence matter more than numbers." The Zelari generals listened carefully. They had seen his strategies work before, and they trusted him, but even they could not fully grasp the magnitude of what he was planning. Every movement, every strike, every diversion was calculated to force the Dravari into mistakes, to stretch their forces thin, and to exploit their assumptions. When the battle began, it was more intense than any previous conflict. Dravari fleets swept across multiple star systems simultaneously, attacking cities, supply depots, and communication centers. They expected chaos, confusion, and surrender. What they found instead was coordination, precision, and resistance unlike anything they had anticipated. Elias directed the defense from the center of the war room. Using real-time intelligence and constant adjustments, he moved forces with perfect timing. Small squads struck enemy supply lines, decoy ships lured entire fleets into traps, and hidden units disabled command centers. Every action weakened the Dravari, forcing their soldiers to fight without guidance or clear purpose. Amara watched from the observation deck, her heart pounding. She had married for peace, yet she found herself witnessing something extraordinary. One human mind, aided by courage and loyalty, was orchestrating a defense against a galaxy's largest army and succeeding. As the battle raged, Elias launched a decisive maneuver. He targeted the Dravari's Central Command fleet, the heart of their operations. A small, highly trained Zelari squad, guided by human tactics, infiltrated the enemy fleet, disabling ships silently and efficiently. Meanwhile, the main Zelari forces struck from unexpected directions, exploiting confusion and panic. Explosions rippled through the Dravari armada. Communication failures caused their soldiers to retreat from key positions. Conflicting orders led to disorganization. Entire fleets fell into traps that had been meticulously planned for days. The Dravari generals realized too late that they had underestimated one human, Captain Elias Varn, and the intelligence of his allies. Their massive army, which had once seemed unstoppable, was collapsing. On the battlefield, courage and intellect triumphed over sheer numbers. The human-led forces turned the tide completely. Ships were captured, soldiers surrendered, and the Dravari's technological advantage was neutralized by strategy and adaptability. Queen Amara could hardly contain her amazement. She had watched humans in small actions before, but now she saw the full impact of one human's mind on a galactic scale. Elias was not just clever, he was visionary. He could see the battlefield as a whole, anticipate every move, and inspire those around him to achieve what had seemed impossible. As the Dravari retreated for the final time, the galaxy witnessed an unprecedented event. One human had changed the course of war, saving entire civilizations through intellect, courage, and strategic brilliance. The Zelari capital remained intact, their people safe, and their enemies humbled. Elias returned to the palace quietly. There were no celebrations, no speeches. He simply reported on the battle, explaining what had worked and what could be improved. His humility was striking, considering the magnitude of his achievement. Amara approached him privately. "You have done more than I could have imagined," she said. "One human has faced entire armies and won." Elias shook his head. "I am not alone. We all played our parts. Courage, planning, and trust made this possible, but humans, we fight differently. We do not rely on size or strength. We rely on observation, adaptation, and perseverance." The queen smiled. She realized that humanity's true strength was not in weapons or numbers, but in mind and will. Elias had shown her what humans could do, and in doing so, he had changed the galaxy's perception forever. Word of the victory spread quickly. Across star systems, species who had doubted humans now reconsidered. Diplomats, generals, and civilians marveled at the tale of one human who had outmaneuvered entire armies and inspired hope in a time of fear. The Zelari celebrated not just a victory, but a new era. Alliances strengthened, and many species sought to learn from humans, hoping to emulate their ingenuity and courage. Peace, fragile but real, began to take hold across the galaxy. For Queen Amara, the transformation was personal as well as political. She had married for peace, expecting a symbol. Instead, she had found a partner, a strategist, and a mind capable of leading civilizations through the darkest times. The human she had chosen to ally with had proven that courage and intelligence could triumph over overwhelming odds. In the quiet moments after the battle, Amara stood with Elias on the observation deck. The stars shimmered above them, calm once more. She reflected on the journey that had begun with a political marriage, a gamble for peace, and the uncertainty of trusting a young, unknown species. "You have changed the galaxy," she said softly. Elias looked out at the stars, his expression calm but determined. "We have changed it together. One human can make a difference, yes, but the strength of the people around him makes it possible. Courage, trust, and intelligence are universal. We all have a role to play." Amara nodded. She understood now that humans were not just survivors. They were innovators, leaders, and a force capable of reshaping the cosmos. Their actions would be remembered for generations, inspiring hope and courage across countless worlds. As peace began to settle over the galaxy, the Zelari and their allies prepared for a new era. One human had faced entire armies alone, yet not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival, unity, and the protection of all who could not protect themselves. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity had claimed its place among the stars. One human mind, bound by courage and strategy, had proven that intellect and will could overcome even the most overwhelming forces. Queen Amara and Captain Elias Varn stood together. not just as a symbol of alliance, but as proof that hope, ingenuity, and determination could light the darkest reaches of space. And as the stars shone above, the galaxy knew. A new era had begun, a time when humans would be remembered not for their weapons, but for their courage, intelligence, and unyielding spirit.